Have you ever wondered what hurts more? Being betrayed by a stranger or discovering that the person who stabbed you in the back was the one you raised, fed, and loved more than life itself? My name is Lorraine Matthews. I'm 67 years old, with calloused hands from so much work, and a heart that has learned to bleed in silence. For decades, I believed that a mother's love was unbreakable, that sacrifice generated gratitude, that giving everything meant receiving at least a little back. But life taught me that some truths only appear when you're on your knees, humiliated in front of everyone, while your own son laughs at your pain. This is the story of how I lost everything, and how I found something that no one can ever take from me again. It all started on a Saturday night 3 months ago. I was standing at the entrance of the most expensive restaurant in the city, the Belmont Crown, a place where each table costs more than my monthly rent. Golden lights bathed the hall as if we were inside a cathedral of luxury. Crystals hung from the ceiling, reflecting points of light that danced on the Italian marble-covered walls. The smell of premium red wine, mixed with expensive perfumes, floated in the air like an invisible cloud that suffocated those who didn't belong to that world. I didn't belong, but my son, Dominic, did, or at least that's what he believed. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting at a huge table in the center of the hall in an impeccable navy blue suit, perfectly cut hair, gold ring shining on his finger. Beside him, his wife, Sienna, wore a red dress that probably cost what I earn in 6 months. She tilted her wine glass with studied elegance, laughing softly at something Dominic had said. They looked like a magazine ad, perfect, untouchable. I approached slowly, feeling every stare stuck on me. My navy blue dress was old but clean. I had ironed it 3 times that afternoon, trying to hide the permanent creases of time. My sandals were comfortable, worn, practical. Nothing there shined, nothing there impressed. When I reached the table, Dominic looked up. For a second, I thought I saw something human there, a flash of recognition, maybe even embarrassment. But what came next was worse. "Mom," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You came." I forced a smile. My heart was pounding too hard, but I tried to seem calm. "Of course I came, Dominic. You invited me." He looked at Sienna. She smiled too, but it was the kind of smile that freezes, cold, calculated. "True," Dominic said, leaning back in his chair as if he were about to make an announcement. "I invited you, but not to sit with us." The words fell like a stone in the middle of a lake. The sound around seemed to wither. Some waiters stopped moving. Faces turned in our direction. I took a slow breath. "What do you mean, son?" He crossed his arms, tilting his head as if explaining something obvious to a foolish child. "Mom, look around. See where you are. See who's here." He gestured to the hall. "This isn't your place. You don't fit." I felt my stomach turn. My hands began to tremble. I gripped my purse strap so hard my fingers turned white. "Dominic, I'm your mother, and I'm grateful for that," he said, but the tone was mechanical. "But gratitude doesn't change reality. You live in a 2-room apartment in the suburbs, you work cleaning houses, you wear thrift store clothes." He paused. "And I don't want people to know you're my mother anymore." The silence that followed was so heavy, I could barely breathe. Sienna took a sip of wine, her lips curved in a malicious smile. "Lorraine, don't take it personally. Dominic is just being honest. You simply aren't part of this level. It's not your fault. Some people are born to rise, others are born to serve." I looked at her, at the expensive dress, at the falsely delicate jewelry, at the eyebrow arched in contempt. And then I looked at Dominic, my son, the boy I held in my lap when he cried with fever at 3 years old. The kid I woke up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast before school. The young man I dressed with clothes I bought with money I earned, scrubbing office floors in empty buildings until midnight. This was the man he had become. "So why did you call me here?" I asked, my voice coming out firmer than I expected. Dominic smiled, a cruel smile. "So you'd understand once and for all what your place is, Mom. I wanted you to see with your own eyes how far I've come, and how far behind you've been left." Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not there, not in front of him. I took a deep breath, and that's when I did something even I didn't expect. I turned to the nearest waiter, a young man with attentive eyes who was standing a few feet away. I made a discreet gesture. He approached immediately. I leaned in and whispered something in his ear. His eyes widened. He looked at me, then at Dominic, and then nodded quickly before disappearing toward the back. Dominic frowned. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. A small, calm smile, but loaded with something he didn't understand yet. "If someone has to leave here tonight, Dominic, it won't be me." The entire hall seemed to freeze. Sienna let out a shrill laugh. "How ridiculous! Who do you think you are?" But I kept smiling, because for the first time in decades, I knew exactly who I was. And they were about to find out too. Dominic stood up from his chair, his face red with contained anger. "Mom, you're making a scene. Leave now before you humiliate yourself even more." I remained motionless. My knees were trembling inside, but my feet were planted on the ground like ancient roots. Something inside me had broken that night, not from sadness, from clarity. "I'm not going anywhere," I replied, each word coming out slowly, heavy as lead. Sienna leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Lorraine, do you really think you can challenge us? You're nobody, a tired old maid living on crumbs. Dominic has supported you your whole life." I turned to her, and for the first time I allowed her to see what I had been hiding for years, the pain, the anger, the wounded dignity. "Sienna, you know nothing about me, nothing about what I did, nothing about what I built while you were busy spending the money my son earns." She recoiled slightly, surprised by the tone. Dominic slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You're leaving now or I'll make you leave." But before anyone could move, the restaurant manager appeared. A tall man in an impeccable gray suit, gray hair combed back. His name was Malcolm, and he walked with the authority of someone who commands an empire. He stopped beside our table, but his eyes were fixed on me. "Good evening, Mrs. Matthews," he said, bowing slightly. Dominic blinked, confused. "Excuse me, sir, but I think there's a mistake." Malcolm ignored him completely. He turned to me with a respect that made the entire hall fall silent. "It's been so long, ma'am. It's an honor to have you here again." I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Malcolm. It has been a while." Dominic looked from me to Malcolm, the confusion turning into something close to panic. "Wait, you know each other?" Malcolm finally looked at Dominic, but without warmth. "I've known Mrs. Matthews for many years. In fact, I know her very well." Sienna gave a nervous laugh. "This is absurd. She's just one of the largest investors in this restaurant," Malcolm cut in, his voice cold as ice, "and 5 other establishments in this city." The silence that fell was absolute. I saw Dominic's face lose all color. His lips opened, but no sound came out. Sienna looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Malcolm continued, impassive. "Mrs. Matthews owns 40% of the shares of the Belmont Crown. She's also the reason this place still exists after the 2019 crisis. Without her investment, we would have closed our doors." I said nothing. I just let the words settle on them like heavy ashes. Dominic finally found his voice, but it came out trembling. "Mom, you have money?" I stared at him, really stared at him, and what I saw was a stranger. "I always have, Dominic. You just never cared to ask." He stumbled back into his chair, his hands shaking. But you live in that apartment. You work cleaning houses. I chose to live like that," I cut in, my voice finally rising. "Because I never wanted money to define who I am. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I have." Tears finally ran down my face, but I didn't hide them. "And even so, you humiliated me, treated me like garbage, in front of all these people." Dominic buried his face in his hands. Malcolm turned to him, his tone cutting. "Mr. Matthews, I believe it would be appropriate for you to apologize, publicly." But before Dominic could respond, I raised my hand. "No, Malcolm, I don't want apologies. Not today." I turned to leave, but stopped and looked at Dominic one last time. "You want to know what the difference is between us, son? I built everything I have without stepping on anyone, without humiliating anyone. And you? You became exactly the kind of person I prayed you'd never be. And then I left. Each step weighed like a mountain, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Because for the first time in decades, I was walking away from the shame I didn't deserve to carry, and towards something I had forgotten existed, my own dignity. The days that followed that night were the strangest of my life. I woke up every morning expecting to feel regret, shame, or maybe even fear of what I'd done. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. I returned to my small apartment on the edge of the city, the same two-room place I'd lived in for over 20 years. The walls were thin, the paint was peeling in the corners, and the kitchen faucet leaked no matter how many times I tried to fix it. But it was mine, and for the first time, that felt like enough. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the street below. Children played soccer in the narrow alley. An old man swept the sidewalk in front of his shop. A young mother carried groceries while balancing a baby on her hip. This was my world. Simple, real, honest. And I realized I had spent so many years hiding from Dominic that I had forgotten how much I loved it. But the peace didn't last long. 3 days after the restaurant incident, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Dominic. My hand hesitated over the phone. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to throw the phone out the window. But another part, the part that had carried him inside me for 9 months, that had stayed up all night when he was sick, that had sacrificed everything for his future, that part made me answer. Hello? Silence. Then, his voice. Broken. Raw. Mom, I need to see you. I closed my eyes. I could hear the pain in his voice, but I could also hear something else. Desperation. And I knew desperation didn't always mean change. Sometimes it just meant damage control. Why? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Because I need to talk to you. Please, I'll come to you. Just, please. I looked around my small apartment, at the faded couch, at the chipped coffee table, at the life I had built with my own hands. Fine, I said. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. And I hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 30 years. I thought about the young woman I had been when I gave birth to Dominic. 22 years old, alone, terrified, but determined. His father had left before Dominic was even born, disappearing into the night like smoke. I never saw him again. I raised Dominic by myself. I worked 3 jobs. I cleaned offices at night, waited tables during the day, and took in laundry on weekends. Every dollar I earned went to him. Food, clothes, school supplies. I wore the same 3 dresses for years. I ate rice and beans most nights so he could have meat. I walked miles to save bus fare so he could take piano lessons. And he was a good boy, a smart boy. He got straight A's, he won awards, he got a scholarship to a prestigious university. I cried the day he got the acceptance letter. I thought I had done it. I thought I had given him the life he deserved. But somewhere along the way, I lost him. He started making friends with wealthy classmates. He started talking differently, dressing differently, acting differently. He stopped bringing friends home. He stopped mentioning me in conversations. When I visited him at college, he would meet me outside, never inviting me into his dorm. And I told myself it was normal, that he was just growing up, finding his place in the world. But the truth was, he was learning to be ashamed of me. The next day, at exactly 2 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. I opened it. Dominic stood there, and I barely recognized him. His eyes were red and swollen. His hair was uncombed. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, nothing like the expensive suits he usually wore. He looked broken. "Mom," he whispered. I stepped aside and let him in. He walked into my small living room and stopped, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. His eyes lingered on the old couch, the worn rug, the small TV on a rickety stand. Then he looked at me. "You really do live like this," he said softly. "Yes," I replied. "I do." He sank onto the couch and put his head in his hands. I sat across from him in my old armchair and waited. Finally, he spoke. "I've been fired." I felt a jolt of surprise, but I kept my face neutral. "What happened?" He laughed bitterly. "What do you think happened? Word got out about what I did at the restaurant. Someone recorded it, posted it online. It went viral. My boss called me into his office and told me that the company couldn't be associated with someone who publicly humiliates his own mother. So they let me go. I absorbed this information slowly. I hadn't known about any video. I hadn't looked at social media in weeks. And Sienna? I asked. His jaw tightened. Sienna left me, packed her bags 2 days ago and went back to her parents. She said she didn't sign up to be married to a disgraced failure. I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness for him, anger at her, and something else, something darker. A small, bitter satisfaction that he was finally experiencing the consequences of his choices. But I pushed that feeling down. I'm his mother. No matter what he's done, I'm still his mother. Dominic, I said quietly, why did you do it? Why did you treat me that way? He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Because I was ashamed, he choked out. I was ashamed that I came from nothing. That my mother was a cleaning lady. That I grew up poor. I wanted to be someone. I wanted to be important. And I thought that if people knew where I came from, they wouldn't respect me. His voice broke. I thought I had to erase you to become someone. I felt my own tears coming, but I held them back. And did it work? I asked. Did erasing me make you someone? He shook his head, sobbing now. No, it made me nothing. It made me empty. I have no job, no wife, no friends. Everyone has seen that video. Everyone knows what I did. And the worst part is, they're right to judge me, because you gave me everything, and I gave you nothing but shame. He looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that, but I'm begging you. Please, I have nowhere else to go. I sat there, looking at my son, this grown man who was once my baby boy, and I felt the weight of every decision I would make in the next few minutes. I could turn him away. I could tell him he made his choices, and now he has to live with them. I could slam the door in his face the way he slammed the door on me, but I couldn't, because I'm not him. Dominic, I said slowly, I can forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. If you want to rebuild our relationship, you have to earn it. You have to prove that you've changed, not with words, with actions. He nodded frantically. Anything. I'll do anything. I took a deep breath. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here with me, in this apartment. You're going to get a job, not a fancy job, a real job, waiting tables, washing dishes, whatever you can find. You're going to learn what it means to work with your hands, the way I did. And you're going to volunteer at a soup kitchen, at a shelter, somewhere where you'll see people who have less than you ever did. And you're going to learn gratitude and humility and respect. I leaned forward, my voice firm. And if you ever treat anyone the way you treated me that night, you'll be out of my life for good. Do you understand? He nodded, tears still flowing. I understand. I stood up. Good. You can sleep on the couch. I'll get you some blankets. As I walked to the closet, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just saving my son. I was teaching him what I should have taught him years ago. That dignity isn't about money. It's about how you treat people. And that night, I decided I would show him what real strength looks like. The weeks that followed were harder than I expected. Having Dominic in my small apartment was like living with a stranger. He was quiet, withdrawn, spending most of his time on the couch staring at his phone or out the window. I could see the weight of his shame crushing him, but I also knew that shame alone wouldn't change him. Only action would. I helped him find a job at a small diner downtown called Rosie's. It was the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987. The owner, a tough woman named Gloria, with arms like tree trunks, looked Dominic up and down when he came in for an interview. You ever waited tables before? She asked, chewing gum loudly. No, ma'am, he said quietly. She snorted. Figures. You got that look, like you think you're too good for this. I saw Dominic's jaw tighten, but he kept his voice respectful. I don't think that, ma'am. I need this job, and I'll work hard. Gloria stared at him for a long moment, then shrugged. Fine. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't be late. Dominic nodded, and I felt a small flicker of pride. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He just accepted it. The next morning, I woke him at 5. He groaned but got up. I made him coffee and toast while he got dressed in the simple black pants and white shirt Gloria had told him to wear. He looked so different from the polished executive he had been just weeks ago. His hair was unstyled. His face was unshaven. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion. But he went. And when he came home 12 hours later, his feet aching, his back sore, and his pride thoroughly crushed by demanding customers and Gloria's sharp tongue, he didn't quit. He just collapsed on the couch and slept. The next day, he got up and went again. And the day after that. And the day after that. I watched him slowly transform. The arrogance drained out of him like poison from a wound. He started saying please and thank you without thinking. He started listening when people talked instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. He started noticing things, small kindnesses, struggles, the quiet dignity of people who worked hard for little recognition. One evening, about a month into his new job, he came home with a strange look on his face. "Mom," he said, sitting down at our small kitchen table, "can I tell you something?" I poured him a glass of water and sat across from him. Of course. He stared at his hands, rough now from work. "There's this regular at the diner, old man, comes in every morning at 7, orders the same thing, 2 eggs, toast, black coffee, never tips more than 50 cents. He paused. "Today, I found out he's a veteran, lives alone. His wife died last year. He told me that coming to the diner every morning is the only reason he gets out of bed, because Gloria always remembers his name, because the waitresses talk to him, because he feels like he matters." Dominic's voice cracked. And I realized I spent my whole life chasing things that didn't matter: money, status, approval from people who didn't actually care about me. But this man, he has almost nothing, and he's rich in ways I never was. I reached across the table and took his hand. "That's what I wanted you to see, son. That the value of a life isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in moments, in connections, in the way you make people feel." He squeezed my hand, tears in his eyes. "I wasted so much time, Mom, so many years being someone I'm not, being someone I thought I should be." "Then don't waste any more," I said gently. "Start now. Be who you really are." He nodded, and I felt, for the first time since that terrible night at the restaurant, that maybe, just maybe, I was getting my son back. But just when I thought we were finally healing, something happened that would test both of us in ways I never imagined. It was a Friday night. Dominic had just finished his shift and was walking home when he passed a familiar luxury car parked outside a bar. Sienna's car. He stopped. He told me later that every instinct told him to keep walking, to let the past stay in the past. But something, curiosity or maybe unfinished business, made him go inside. He found her at the bar, surrounded by well-dressed men, laughing that high-pitched laugh he used to think was charming. When she saw him, her smile vanished. "Dominic," she said coldly, "what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he replied. She looked him up and down, taking in his worn clothes, his tired face, his calloused hands. "God, you look pathetic," she said, loud enough for everyone around to hear. "I'm so glad I left when I did." The men around her laughed. Dominic felt the old anger rising, the old pride, the old need to defend himself, to prove he was still worth something. But then he remembered something I had told him. Dignity isn't about what people think of you. It's about what you think of yourself. So instead of lashing out, instead of trying to hurt her back, he simply looked at her with something close to pity. "Sienna," he said quietly, "I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do, but it won't be with me. And honestly, I'm grateful for that." And he walked out. When he came home and told me what happened, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Peace. "I used to think she made me better," he said. "But really, she just made me someone I wasn't, someone I didn't like." I hugged him then, really hugged him, and felt him hug me back. "I'm proud of you," I whispered, and I meant it. But even as we stood there holding each other in my small kitchen, I knew the hardest test was still to come. Because healing isn't linear, and change isn't permanent until it's been tested by fire. And that fire was about to arrive. The fire came in the form of a phone call. It was early December, nearly 3 months since that night at the Belmont Crown. Dominic had been living with me, working at Rosie's, volunteering at a homeless shelter on weekends, and slowly, painfully, becoming the man I always knew he could be. We had settled into a quiet rhythm, morning coffee together, evenings talking about his day, small moments of grace that stitched our relationship back together, stitch by careful stitch. And then the phone rang. Dominic was at work. I was alone in the apartment, folding laundry, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Hello? Mrs. Matthews? A professional male voice, formal, cautious. Yes? My name is Richard Austin. I'm an attorney representing Dominic Matthews in a legal matter. Is this a good time to talk? My heart dropped. What legal matter? There was a pause. Mrs. Matthews, I'm calling to inform you that Sienna Matthews, your former daughter-in-law, is filing a lawsuit against both you and your son. She's claiming defamation, emotional distress, and financial damages related to the incident at the Belmont Crown restaurant. I felt the room tilt. What? She's alleging that the public humiliation she suffered as a result of that evening has caused her severe psychological harm and damaged her reputation. She's seeking compensation in the amount of $2 million. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. That's insane. She humiliated me. She and Dominic both. I understand, Mrs. Matthews, and that will be part of our defense, but I need you to know that this is a serious legal action. She has representation and they're aggressive. This could go to trial. I closed my eyes. Does Dominic know? Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Since you're named as a co-defendant, I'll be reaching out to him next. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. My small apartment suddenly felt even smaller, the walls pressing in. I had spent my entire life working, saving, building something stable. And now Sienna, a woman who had contributed nothing but cruelty, was trying to take it all away. When Dominic came home that evening, I told him. I watched his face go through every emotion. Shock, anger, fear, and finally, something that looked like resignation. This is my fault, he said quietly. She's doing this because of what I did, because I humiliated her in public. No, I said firmly. She's doing this because she's vindictive and greedy. You can't take responsibility for her choices, Dominic. You can only take responsibility for your own. But I could see the guilt eating at him. Over the next few weeks, we met with lawyers. We went over every detail of that night. We reviewed security footage from the restaurant. We prepared statements. And with every meeting, I felt the weight growing heavier, not just because of the lawsuit, but because I could see Dominic slipping back into old patterns. The shame, the self-loathing, the belief that he was fundamentally flawed and that everything he touched turned to ash. One night, I found him sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at nothing. I should just settle, he said. Give her whatever she wants. End this. With what money? I asked. You don't have $2 million. You do. The words hung in the air between us. I sat down beside him. Dominic, I'm not giving that woman a single dollar. Not because I'm being stubborn, but because what she's doing is wrong, and sometimes you have to stand up to wrong, even when it's hard. But what if we lose? He whispered. What if she takes everything? What if I cost you everything again? I took his face in my hands and made him look at me. Listen to me. You are not your mistakes. You are not your worst moment. You are a person trying to do better, and that's all any of us can do. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, I said gently. But you have me anyway. That's what family means. The trial date was set for late January. As it approached, I could feel the tension building. Not just in Dominic, but in me too. I found myself lying awake at night, running through worst-case scenarios. What if we lost? What if they took my investments? What if I lost the restaurants, the security I'd built over decades of work? And then, 1 week before the trial, something unexpected happened. Malcolm, the manager of the Belmont Crown, called me. Mrs. Matthews, he said, I've been following the lawsuit, and I want you to know that the entire staff is prepared to testify on your behalf. I felt a surge of gratitude. Malcolm, thank you. But I don't want to drag anyone else into this. You're not dragging us, he said firmly. We're volunteering, because what you did that night, standing up for yourself, showing that dignity matters more than status, that mattered to us. A lot of us have been treated the way Sienna and Dominic treated you, and we want to stand with you. I had to wipe my eyes before I could respond. Thank you, I whispered. And then he said something that changed everything. There's something else. We found additional security footage from the parking lot. It shows Sienna that night, after you left, laughing and bragging to her friends about how she and Dominic put you in your place. Her exact words were, "That pathetic old woman actually thought she belonged here. We showed her. It's all on camera." My breath caught. "Can you send that to our lawyer?" Already did. When I told Dominic and our attorney, I saw the first real hope in Dominic's eyes in weeks. "This could change everything," our lawyer said. "If she was bragging about humiliating you, it completely undermines her claim of emotional distress." The day of the trial arrived. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I'd ironed so carefully months ago. Dominic wore a borrowed suit. We walked into that courthouse together, and I held his hand the whole way. The courtroom was cold and sterile. Sienna sat on the other side with her lawyers, looking immaculate in designer clothes, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She didn't even glance at us. The trial lasted 2 days. Sienna's lawyers painted me as a manipulative woman who had orchestrated a public humiliation of their client. They showed the video from the restaurant, focusing on the moment when Malcolm revealed my investments, claiming I had deliberately set up the entire evening to embarrass Sienna. But then, it was our turn. Our lawyer called witness after witness, staff from the Belmont Crown who testified about what they'd heard Sienna say, Gloria from Rosie's Diner, who talked about how Dominic had changed, how he'd become humble and hardworking, regular customers who spoke about the old veteran and how Dominic had befriended him. And then they played the parking lot footage. The courtroom fell silent as we watched Sienna laughing, mocking me, celebrating my humiliation with her friends. When it finished, I looked over at her. For the first time since the trial began, she looked scared. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they came back, the 4 women stood. We fined in favor of the defendants, Lorraine Matthews and Dominic Matthews. The plaintiff's claims are dismissed with prejudice. I felt Dominic's hand squeeze mine so hard it hurt. We had won. But more than that, we had been vindicated. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in our faces. And for a moment, I felt the old instinct to hide, to shrink away. But then I thought about everything I'd been through, everything I'd survived, everything I'd built. So I stopped and faced the cameras. "I want to say something," I said, my voice steady. "To anyone out there who's ever been made to feel small, to anyone who's ever been told they don't belong, to anyone who's ever been ashamed of where they came from, you are enough, exactly as you are. Don't let anyone, not even family, make you believe otherwise." I looked at Domin. I looked at Dominic, standing beside me, tears streaming down his face. And to anyone who's made mistakes, who's hurt the people they love, who thinks they can't come back from their worst moment, you can. Change is possible. Redemption is real. But it requires something most people aren't willing to give: humility, the courage to admit you were wrong, the strength to start over from the bottom, and the commitment to become better, not just for others, but for yourself. The cameras kept rolling, but I wasn't talking to them anymore. I was talking to every person out there who needed to hear it. My son humiliated me in the worst way possible. He made me feel worthless in front of hundreds of people. And I would be lying if I said I've completely forgiven him. Forgiveness takes time. Trust takes even longer. But I can say this: I've seen him change. I've watched him humble himself. I've witnessed him choose character over comfort. And that's given me hope, not just for him, but for all of us. I paused, feeling the weight of every eye on me. Because if we can't believe in redemption, if we can't believe people can change, then what are we doing? We're just condemning each other to our worst moments forever. And I refuse to live in that world. Dominic stepped forward then, his voice hoarse but clear. "I want to say something too," he said. "My mother is the strongest person I've ever known. She raised me alone. She worked herself to the bone to give me opportunities, and I repaid her by being ashamed of her, by treating her like she was nothing, by choosing status over love." His voice broke, but he pushed through. I don't deserve her forgiveness. I don't deserve her grace, but she gave it to me anyway. Not because I earned it, but because that's who she is. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to become worthy of that gift. He turned to me, fresh tears falling. Mom, I know I can never undo what I did. I know I can't erase that night. But I promise you, I will never stop trying to be better. I will never stop working to make you proud. And I will never ever forget where I came from again. I pulled him into my arms then, right there in front of all those cameras, and I held my son the way I used to when he was small and scared and needed his mother. I know you will, I whispered into his ear. I know. The next few weeks were strange. The video of our courthouse statement went viral, just like the original restaurant video had. But this time, the response was different. Messages poured in from all over the country, people sharing their own stories of family betrayal, of redemption, of hard-won forgiveness. A woman named Patricia wrote to tell me that she'd been estranged from her daughter for 5 years, but after seeing our story, they'd reconnected. A man named James said he'd finally apologized to his elderly father for years of neglect. Hundreds of people, thousands, telling me that our story had given them permission to be vulnerable, to admit their mistakes, to try again. I read every single message, and I cried over most of them. Because I realized that what had started as my personal nightmare had somehow become something bigger, a mirror for other people's pain, a permission slip for healing. Dominic continued working at Rosie's. He could have gone back to his old career, could have leveraged the publicity to rebuild his professional life, but he didn't. I'm not ready yet, he told me one evening, as we sat together in our small apartment. I need more time here, in the real world, with real people. Remembering what actually matters. I didn't argue. I understood. 3 months after the trial, on a warm April evening, Dominic came home with an unusual request. Mom, he said, there's something I want to do, and I need your help. What is it? He took a deep breath. I want to start a foundation for single mothers, specifically single mothers who are working multiple jobs, who are sacrificing everything for their kids, who need help, but are too proud to ask for it. I felt my throat tighten. Dominic, I want to call it the Lorraine Matthews Foundation, he continued, his voice gaining strength, and I want it to provide scholarships, job training, childcare assistance, whatever they need to build stable lives for their families. Because you did all of that alone, with no help, and you deserve support. And there are thousands of women out there right now who deserve the same. I couldn't speak. I could only nod as tears blurred my vision. I've been saving every penny I earn, he said. I have about $8,000. It's not much, but it's a start. And I thought maybe you'd want to contribute too? We could do this together. I looked at my son, this man who had been so lost and was now finding his way back, and I felt something shift deep in my chest. Not forgiveness, not exactly. Something more complex, something like pride mixed with grief, mixed with hope. Yes, I said, let's do it together. We launched the Lorraine Matthews Foundation 6 months later. Between my investment and Dominic's tireless work, applying for grants and organizing fundraisers, we were able to help 12 families in our first year. 12 single mothers who were drowning in work and worry and exhaustion. We paid for childcare so they could go back to school. We covered rent so they wouldn't be evicted. We provided groceries when the money ran out before the month did. And every single time we helped someone, I saw Dominic's face light up in a way it never had when he was climbing corporate ladders and accumulating status symbols. He had found his purpose. And in a strange way, so had I. Because I realized that my story, painful as it was, had become a gift. Not just to Dominic, but to everyone who heard it and saw themselves in it. Every mother who'd been taken for granted, every parent who'd been abandoned by their children, every person who'd been made to feel small. My pain had become their permission to demand better. 1 year after the trial, on a cold December evening, Dominic and I stood together at the Belmont Crown. Malcolm had invited us to a special dinner, a celebration of the Foundation's first anniversary. As we walked into that grand dining room, the same room where I'd been humiliated, where I'd been told I didn't belong, something incredible happened. The entire restaurant stood up and applauded. Every guest, every staff member, even the kitchen crew came out to clap. Malcolm stood at the center table, beaming. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "we wanted to honor you tonight. Not just for what you've built with the foundation, but for what you taught all of us that night 1 year ago. That dignity isn't about money, that strength isn't about status, and that the measure of a person is how they treat others, especially those who can't do anything for them in return." He gestured to a plaque on the wall I hadn't noticed before. It read, "The Lorraine Matthews Table, reserved for those who understand that everyone deserves a seat." I couldn't hold back the tears this time. They flowed freely as Dominic put his arm around me and held me close. "You did this, Mom," he whispered. "You changed everything." But I shook my head. "We did this," I corrected him. "Together." That night, sitting at that table with my son, surrounded by people who had witnessed my lowest moment and were now celebrating my highest, I finally understood something I'd been searching for my whole life. Worth isn't given. It's inherent. I had always been worthy, even when I was scrubbing floors, even when I was wearing thrift store dresses, even when my own son was ashamed of me. I had always been enough. And once I truly believed that, once it settled deep in my bones, everything else fell into place. Dominic continued to grow, not perfectly. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns tried to resurface, but he caught himself. He course-corrected. He kept choosing the hard right over the easy wrong, and our relationship, while never quite the same as before, became something new, something more honest, built not on obligation or guilt, but on mutual respect and hard-won understanding. The foundation expanded. By year 3, we were helping over 50 families. By year 5, we'd opened chapters in 3 other cities. And with each family we helped, with each mother we supported, I felt the old wounds heal a little more. On my 70th birthday, Dominic threw me a small party at my apartment. Nothing fancy. Just Gloria from the diner, Malcolm and some staff from the Belmont Crown, a few mothers from the foundation, and the old veteran Dominic had befriended, Mr. Patterson. We ate simple food, laughed at old stories, and as the evening wound down, Dominic stood up. "I want to say something," he announced, and the room grew quiet. He looked at me, his eyes clear and steady. "7 years ago, I stood in a restaurant and told my mother she didn't belong. I told her she wasn't good enough. I treated her like she was an embarrassment, a burden, something to be hidden away and forgotten. The room was absolutely silent, and she would have had every right to walk away from me forever, to cut me out of her life the way I tried to cut her out of mine. But she didn't. She gave me something I didn't deserve, a second chance. And then she gave me something even more valuable, the tools to actually change." He raised his glass. "Mom, you didn't just save my life. You taught me what it means to be human, to be humble, to understand that our worth isn't in what we have or what we achieve, but in how we treat each other, especially those who society tells us don't matter." Everyone raised their glasses. "So here's to you, to the strongest, most dignified, most gracious woman I've ever known. I love you, Mom, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being your son." I stood up, my legs shaky, and hugged him as tightly as I could. "You already are," I whispered. "You already are." Later that night, after everyone had gone home and it was just Dominic and me cleaning up, he said something that surprised me. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me? Not just say you forgive me, but actually, completely, deep down forgive me." I stopped washing dishes and turned to look at him. It was a question I'd asked myself many times over the years. "Honestly," I said, "I don't know. Some wounds go so deep that the scars never fully fade. And what you did, Dominic, it cut deeper than almost anything in my life." I saw pain flash across his face, but he nodded. "But," I continued, "I've learned that forgiveness isn't a destination. It's not a place you arrive at one day and then you're done. It's a choice you make over and over again. Some days are easier than others. Some days I look at you and I only see who you are now, the good man you've become. Other days, I still see that moment at the restaurant and it hurts all over again." I took his hands. "But every day, I choose to keep loving you, to keep believing in you, to keep hoping that the person you are now is the person you'll continue to be. And maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, but choosing to move forward anyway. He squeezed my hands, tears in his eyes. That's more than I deserve. Probably, I said with a small smile. But love isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we choose to give. Now, as I sit here telling you this story, I'm 73 years old. Dominic is 45. He runs the foundation full-time now. He never went back to his corporate job. He found something more valuable than a six-figure salary: purpose. He met someone new, a woman named Angela, who works as a social worker. She's kind, humble, and she treats me with genuine respect. They got married last year in a simple ceremony at a community center. No expensive venue, no designer dress, just love and commitment and the people who mattered most. And when Dominic introduced me at the wedding as the strongest woman I know, the person who taught me what real strength looks like, I finally felt it. Complete peace. Not because the pain was gone. It wasn't. It never fully goes away. But because I had reclaimed something that no one can ever take from me again, my sense of self-worth. I learned that you can't wait for other people to validate you. You can't build your worth on what others think of you. Because people, even people who love you, will fail you. They'll disappoint you. They'll hurt you. But if you know, deep in your bones, that you are valuable simply because you exist, simply because you've lived with integrity and kindness and courage, then nothing anyone says or does can truly diminish you. That night at the Belmont Crown, when Dominic told me I didn't belong, he was wrong. I belonged there more than anyone, not because of my money, not because of my investments, but because I knew my worth. And once you know your worth, no one can take it away. If you're listening to this and you've been made to feel small, if someone in your life has treated you as less than you are, if you've been carrying shame that isn't yours to carry, I want you to hear me clearly. You are enough, exactly as you are. You don't need to be richer, thinner, smarter, or more accomplished to be worthy of love and respect. You just need to be you, and anyone who makes you feel otherwise is revealing their own emptiness, not yours. Stand up, speak up, take up space. You belong here, we all do.